Right, now let's go to the word. Now you can either follow up here, or if you have your Bible, you can turn to it. I'm going to read it out. Immediately he made the let me actually tell you which one. It's Matthew 14. It's because I've got my notes here, so sorry, you should get your own notes. So it's Matthew 14, 22 to 33. And it says here, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." All right, so what we got here? We got a storm similar to the one that we have here. I think it's actually much, much worse on this particular chapter. And Jesus has done a lot of ministry. He's just fed 5,000 people. He's done a miracle, right? And now they're crossing over to a different part, right? And they've got to cross over the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus says, "Okay, you guys go in front of me. I'll meet you there." And then he goes away to pray. So the disciples are on their way, and then a storm comes. And it says that the boat is getting crashed around by the waves, and they're terrified. Then they see Jesus, and instead of being like, "Yes, Jesus is there," they think it's a ghost. And Peter says, "If it is you," so now Peter recognizes who this is. He says, "If it's you, let me come to you." So there's this now step of faith that he's showing. And Peter steps out onto the water. And so you've got this miracle going on. And then Peter's focusing on Jesus, and then now the wind starts. And Peter's freaking out. Because he's like, maybe it was just solid, it was stagnant water. But now the wind comes and the waves are starting to form around him. And he's thinking, "I'm going to die." And so he cries out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus is like, "Dude, chill." And he gets back in the boat. And Jesus doesn't challenge Peter as to, "Why can't you just walk on water like everyone else?" That's not what he's saying to him. He challenges the amount of faith that he has in Jesus. And there's three major points that we can take. Lily, if we can go to the next slide. First thing, the disciples were afraid because they felt trapped. They're out probably, if you were to take it to the Sea of Galilee, they're probably out about 3 miles. Okay? 3 miles with no land around them. That would freak me out on a good day. But now there's a storm. And they feel trapped. They're in this boat. There's nowhere to go. Second thing, Peter's response to the storm was to walk with Jesus. So where most people would be like, "I think the boat is safer," Peter says, "I think Jesus is safer." Third thing, Peter focused his attention on the rising storm rather than Jesus, which caused him to sink. And we just spoke about that. As long as he was looking at Jesus, his faith was alive because he could see God before him and he knew he cared about him. As soon as he took his eyes off God, everything starts to fall apart and he can't walk anymore. As well as being told that I look very tired nowadays, I also have other lovely conversations with my parents. One of them is revolving around their health currently because they're getting a little bit older, which I don't think they like to hear, but they are. And they're Indian, so basically Indians will eat anything that's smothered in oil, which as a staple diet explains why I'm vertically challenged, right? Because there was no protein. It was just veg fried. triple fried, really. And it was like, all right, go for it. Have this and as much dough as you want. You're going to be a big boy. That did not happen, right? So I'm trying to tell them, okay, look, you guys got to eat healthier. And my dad's response is YOLO. You know, he is that is literally his response, which is ironic because he's Hindu, so he thinks he's going to get reincarnated, but then I think he forgets that when he sees chocolate pancakes in front of him. So anyway, it's a whole thing, right? And the question that I want to pose to you guys is, when I say the word comfort and I say the word safety, what do you think of? Is it the same thing to you? Because for my mom and dad, their comfort food is Indian food, right? Which they just call food. Obviously, we call it Indian food to decipher which is which. And that's their comfort food. They love eating vegetables triple and quadruple fried. And that's comfortable, but it's not safe, because in this day and age of increased levels of nutrition and take care of yourself and exercise more and people are living longer and all that stuff, it's kind of frowned upon. But it's comfortable. Because I think I went and I tried to offer my dad, it was some sort of fruit. And it was like I was punishing him. You know, he looked so uncomfortable. And I was like, this is good for you. And he's like, it's not good for my taste buds. It's not comfortable. And it's kind of like, if I was to give you an analogy of comfort and safety, because I was a Hindu, I wasn't allowed to eat beef for 17 years. Which is tough going, really. And now I love steak. It is the best. My vegan friends, however, do not seem to agree with me. And I would say that me eating steak in a vegan restaurant would probably tell you the difference between comfort and safety. Because I'm comfortable eating that steak. It's nice, especially with peppercorn sauce. But the vegans around me are sharpening their knives. I am not safe. One of them is going to come at me soon. If we go to the next slide, we can often confuse the words comfort and safety to mean the same thing. The difficult reality is that sometimes those two words don't end up being the same. Comfort is a position of ease, while safety is a certainty of protection against danger. We can have both at the same time, but there are times where we have to sacrifice one for the other. And just like my conversation with my parents, you guys need to start eating healthier. I'm asking them to compromise, to sacrifice their comfort for their safety, for their health, for their well-being. This is exactly what Jesus had to do with Peter and the disciples, because they were comfortable in the boat. But when we read through the scripture, it's obvious that boat is going to break soon. They were terrified. I mean, this is like the waves are crashing up. And that's why they're worried. I mean, if it was just choppy waters, yeah, it'd be uncomfortable, but they wouldn't be terrified. It says they were terrified. They are worried for their lives. But they're comfortable because they know boat, float, water. If you guys are okay, I'm not going to elaborate on that. And that's why they've gone their head. And now they see Jesus out on shore. He's walking on the water. And in their mind, they're thinking, that does not look comfortable, therefore, that cannot be safe. And they're saying, I'm comfortable here because I know what this is. But when we read the story, we know it's not safe. And the time of peace that comes in this passage is when Peter steps out of the boat and onto water. Against all odds, against everything that people think, he's standing on water what people would consider unsafe and uncomfortable, that's where he finds peace and rest and safety. Because it's not about where we are physically, it's about where our hearts are spiritually. If you belong to Jesus, if you belong to God, you are safe. Not from the trials of life. Believe it or not, Christians do have a tough time. Some of them were burned at the stake during the Roman era for just believing in Jesus. Some of them still are burned at the stake in places in Asia for believing in Jesus. So why are they safe? They're safe because they have a peace that transcends the storm. They have a peace that will outlive the storm. That peace is that no matter what happens, nothing can separate them from the love of God. God is for them, he loves them, and there is a place in his presence prepared for them. We would rather live as broken in our comfort than have our comfort broken so that we can live. And that's where I challenge you guys today. Maybe you're comfortable, maybe you think, well, my life's alright. I got about 3 friends, they're cool. I only went into my overdraft once last month, which is great. So life's good. And you might be thinking, well, I'm working towards something, and once I get there, my life is going to be amazing. And the reality is that comfort that we seek, that comfort that we're looking for, is never going to bring us the peace of safety and security that we really need. And we'll just keep on running after something. But we never grab hold of it. Because the hole in our heart can only be filled with Christ. I get incredibly uncomfortable on the sea, which I discovered on our holiday to the Maldives. Okay, it was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. So I'm like, we're all excited, let's go out, we're going to go and see the dolphins. Were we going to see dolphins, guys? Yeah. The dolphins and the sunset. Sounds wonderful, right? It was not. It was not wonderful. Got on this boat. Looked like a dodgy boat already anyway. And everyone's like chatting. I'm like, we're all really excited. I gave it around probably a minute and a half into and this was about 3 hours or something we were on the boat? 2.5 hours. 1 minute and a half, I was about to throw my guts up. It was not fun. But I didn't know that I was seasick, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have gone on a 2.5 hour boat ride on choppy waters. It was incredibly uncomfortable. And after that I got, a little bit interested in boats and why people get seasick and all that sort of stuff. And then, you start going on a wild goose chase on the internet. We've all been on the YouTube recommendation list. It's never a good thing. You always end up where you least expect. So I'm on a wild goose chase right now about boats and ships. And then I get to I read about the captain's duty, and the one thing that I always think is really quite incredible is that that idea that the captain should always go down with the ship, right? And I was curious, what is that for? And it's actually to protect the passengers, right? Because the captain will be the first one most likely to know if the ship's going down. If he leaves, everyone else will drown because nobody told them, by the way, you need to get off the ship. So he needs to make sure that every person is off the ship. That's his duty. But what if the ship only has one passenger? What if the captain is the only passenger? Would it not be crazy if the ship was going down and he still went down with it? And you're like, yeah, well, that's obvious. Our lives are a one-passenger boat. See, we get married, we have kids, we have family, But we are not responsible for other people and the decisions they make. You can guide someone, you can direct them, you can lovingly care for them, you can advise them, you can tell them off and correct them like my wife does every day. But you cannot be responsible or accountable for their life. You yourself are responsible and accountable for your own life. You're the captain of your ship. Can we go to the next slide, Louis? The old saying that the captain must go down with the ship perhaps hits too close to home when we think about our own lives. We by default choose to steer our lives in the hope that we reach our destination. However, when the storm comes, we realize that neither the ship nor the captain is good enough to steer us to safety. This is when we must choose whether to hand over control or wait till our life begins to sink and takes us with it. You can either bow to the storm or bow to the one who calms the storm. You're 3 miles out on shore. Nobody's around you. The waves are getting choppy. And you're getting seasick. Okay, you don't have to get seasick. I would get seasick. And it's getting a little bit turbulent now. And at first you think, okay, this is okay. I can deal with this. I'm just going to, steer the boat with the waves. I'm going to get there. It's fine. The land is only just there. If I can just get to that bit of land, I'll be fine. Now the waves are getting stronger. And now you're thinking, okay, every time I turn the wheel, my life is not going the way that I think it should go. This boat is out of my control right now. What's happening? And now you hit a rock. And there's a hole in your boat now. And you're thinking, now you're trying to work out, is the water cold? Will I die? Will I get hypothermia? Should I have not come out in the first place? And all of these thoughts are going through your head. Suddenly you hear this flutter from afar. And it gets louder and louder and louder. And you realize there's a helicopter above your head. And they drop down a ladder. And you're literally standing on one plank of wood right now. That's the last plank. You're about to sink. But there's a ladder that's been thrown down to you. What do? 3 miles out. No boat. You're not going to swim back. Water's too cold. The waves will overcome you. And now you have a ladder. What do? I would take the ladder. Seems like a safe bet. We don't have to wait till our boat is completely destroyed to take the ladder. The great thing about God is He's gracious. When Jesus was crucified, there was 2 thieves, 2 criminals on the cross next to Him. And one of them is insulting Him. And the other one says, don't you know who this is? This is the Son of God. In His dying breath, He proclaims that Jesus is the Savior and is God. And Jesus' response, you will be with me in paradise. His ship was sinking. But we don't have to wait till our ship's sinking. Because, it doesn't always have to be a dramatic story. Wouldn't it just be so much easier if we just took the ladder in the first place? See, when the water was getting choppy and our lives are becoming a little bit of our control, we could have called up then and said, can you guys send me a helicopter out here because I'm not going to make it through this. But out of our pride, out of our own lives, we decide, I can do this myself. And time and time and time again, we are proven wrong. Because the storm is just too big. And you think, well, I dealt with smaller storms last week, so I can deal with this one. But every time a storm comes, your boat is more damaged, and there's only so many storms that you're going to take. So it's your choice. Do you bow to the storm and say, take me? Or do you bow to Jesus and say, save me? Decisions are tough though, eh? There's two of the best decisions I ever made. Following Jesus, number one. I'm marrying my wife, number two. I don't just say that for brownie points. In 1876, William Orton, who was the president of Western Union, and you'll know Western Union, they've got that black and yellow sign. They're normally in the news for some dodgy wire scams or weird money transfers. But obviously, this is a church, so we don't take any political standpoint or cause any controversy unnecessarily. He got a call from a guy who you might know. You might have heard of him. Anyone know Alexander Graham Bell? If you don't, you should use your phone and Google him. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, calls up William Orton in 1876. He's invented the telephone. It's working. But he's struggling. His business is not doing well. He looks to sell William Orton the patent for the telephone for $100,000, which in today would be equivalent to, I think, $2 million, right? Which sounds like a lot of money. William Orton, he was the president of Western Union. At that time, 1876, telegraph was the mode of communication, right? So you had the little errand boy who would run to your door, knock, and give you the telegraph. So the telephone's just been invented, but Western Union has a monopoly on the telegraph. They are huge, and there's no competition for them. And William Orton has a look and writes back to Alexander Graham Bell saying, I've had a look at your invention, and I can't understand why any company or person would use this. He decides not to take the patent. 2 years later, Alexander Bell patents the telephone himself. Within 20 years of his patent, 600,000 people are now using the telephone. Within 100 years of his patent, 175 million people are using the telephone. And as we sit here today, I think probably 100% of this room is using the telephone. So why am I talking about this? Because I like history? Nope. The reason I'm talking about this is because William Orton couldn't see further. He could only see what was in front of him right now. He thought the telegraph would never go out. Why would people use telephones? It's ridiculous. I think somebody once famously said to Alexander Graham Bell, because William Orton wasn't the only one he approached, someone else who knocked him back said, we have plenty of errand boys to run and do the telegraph. Why would we need a telephone? And they couldn't see further. They could only see what was in front of them right there and then. And that's why Peter sank. He couldn't see further than the storm. He should have made the decision to fix his eyes on Jesus, but instead, he decided that he wouldn't be able to look any further and just be terrified of the storm that was coming his way. And this applies not only to people who don't know Jesus as their Savior. This applies to Christians as well. We put God in a box and we say, here, okay, God, this is you. When I need you, I'll call you. Or I'll telegraph you. Whichever one. But the issue is when the storm is so big, we're like that homeowner who goes up into the attic and he's not changed the light in 17 years. And he's fumbling around looking for that one box. And there's heaps of cardboard boxes. What are the chances he's going to find that box in the dark? Would it not just be better if he kept God with him all the time? Because he's a necessity, although sometimes we don't think that way. Could you go to the next slide? Faith isn't a fix to a momentary life problem. In reality, the permanent problem in our lives is that we don't live by faith every moment. We allow the lies all around us to define who we will become and our limitations. We find it difficult to let go because the world around us convinces us that humanity has all the answers. When we step back and look at the world from an unbiased worldview, we realize that if anything, we are more confused than ever before. The more we walk in the light of our own understanding, the more we worry when it gets dark. It's incredible, isn't it, that we say, as humans, we got it all sorted out. Whenever you ask someone about God, I don't need God. I got it all worked out. And then they say, yeah, I believe in science. Great. Me too. And when you list off all of the foundational scientists who were Christian, it's like, really? All these people who create the foundations of society and how we understand science, especially those who have scientific theories which are proven and not yet to be disproven. You think, these guys were all Christian. These girls were all Christian. A Christian scientist. It's not a contradiction. The difference between a Christian scientist and a scientist is that a Christian scientist knows that it's okay for God to have created the science behind how we live. The scientist will choose every other option apart from God. Because it is implausible to them, they'll tell everybody else it's impossible. Just because we can't understand it doesn't mean it's not true. And I remember when I was studying biomedical science at university and I was surrounded by different faiths, a lot of atheists around. And we would have, now they seem like rap battles, but they were intellectual arguments about evolution and about all these sorts of things. And then I realized that actually it's nothing to do with having all the answers. It doesn't come down to that. Your first step with God is a love at first sight kind of feeling. Your walk with God is falling in love all over again every day. It's not the answers we worry about. It's the commitment. Because our perception of coming to know Jesus is uncomfortable. I want to stay in the boat. I know this place. I know how this is built. I know how to steer this. I know how to get from here, from A to B. And so when someone says to you, you were never meant to be in the boat, you're meant to be out on the shore, it's like, well, no, that's crazy. That's not me. That's maybe somebody else, but it's not me. And yet here we are, And I'm telling you that when you take that first step and you step out on the water and you have that feeling of faith and you have that feeling that God is on your side and you have that feeling of safety and security, and knowing that Jesus, he came, he died for your sin and took on the punishment that you were supposed to take and made you a place eternally with God, and you can live in that peace and contentment for the rest of your lives. There's no comparison.